time. Thank you for being on time. Good to see you all back again. Today is what we call an ID masterclass. So this is an opportunity where we just dig deeper, into the nuances of ID. For those who were here last week, we were talking about what people admire and cherish about the different drives. So we talk about the strengths and vulnerabilities of drives. But I think it's very cool to know that for all that you see your strengths, what is it that other people see that stands out about you? And so last week was actually really insightful, even for me, on the complete drive. And then next week, when we're back together with that group again, we'll be doing the improvised drive. So just so you know, that's coming up. That will be what next week's about. But today, it's an opportunity for you to table whatever's on your mind around either yourself or your ID or your experiences with ID as a way of learning more about, everything that's going on, in terms of how the drives work together, rather than just talking about them singularly and so on. But we always start with talking about where you're at in stride with our peak performance indicator. And, I think everyone here is familiar with that process. I can see, Ron, you might be new. So just to quickly explain it for you, on a scale of 0 to 10, if 10 is you're really in stride, shining, some people talk about being in flow or in the zone, as an athlete would say, but that's where you're being really true to yourself. And if you were, if that's how life was, and you say, yeah, I'm just jumping out of my skin with excitement, that would be a 10. And a 1 out of 10 would be someone who says, I'm so not being true to myself. I don't even know how to make it through the day. What's the number that comes up for you? And so over in the chat box on the right there, you might just want to put in the score that comes up for you. And if you don't relate to a number per se, you just want to put in a word or, another expression that sort of indicates whether you're really in stride or out of stride. There's some high scores coming up here. That's very good. I'll get out of here, Grant Eggington, as if you don't relate to a number. The 70 in verifier, not relating to a number. But it's good to see you're in stride. Knowing you, that would mean a 9 or a 10. That's pretty cool. These are very high scores, guys. Jeez. I had a team earlier this week where everyone was like 5s and 6s, and they were very, very senior leaders of an organization, but going through a transformation, and they're just spent, and what was interesting was that they were all talking about, well, once this gets done, then we can be more in stride. And of course, the challenge is, no. How do you get in stride today with all of that stuff still going on? There's still a way to deal with it so that you're coming from your best place, no matter what it is that life is presenting you. That's the key. You don't wait for everything to change around you and let that dictate how you show up for your day. So these are very good. Does anyone want to talk to their number? Anything that's happened that's made you particularly in a good place, or if your number has come back, what's going on there? Anyone got any comments about what you're doing particularly to be so consistently in stride and how that might relate to your ID?
Paul, this is Ron. I would just say being a new hire to the company is very exciting. So that certainly impacts the number that I disclosed. And, even though COVID and its existing challenges are challenges that are unique, being a parent and being able to spend more time with my children, that certainly is very good for me. So,
yeah. And by company, I'm guessing you mean, which company have you joined, Ron?
I just joined Infoblox.
Ah, good. And do you know your ID? Can you share what your ID is?
I don't know that yet.
Ah, okay. Okay. Well, you'll enjoy learning it today. So when you do it, it'll make even more sense to you. It's very cool. Well, welcome to Infoblox. You've joined an awesome organization, and where this technology is part and parcel of their DNA, and it's a language that everyone uses there. So you'll really enjoy it. I'm sure you'll have a very accelerated sort of onboarding journey compared to what you might have experienced previously.
Indeed.
All right. Anybody else? Joel, how's this week been for you after our conversation last week? How have things, did maybe share with the team, what did you go and do to get from, I think from memory, you were like a 5 or a 6. And obviously today's different for you. So maybe share with the team.
Yeah, so I didn't necessarily, and it's just taking a bit of a conscious effort to do that, to break away and do some things. But we had one of our girls quit on Friday, and it sort of created a bit of chaos, which I don't know why, but I just really enjoy things just not going to plan. Amanda's probably not so much, but and it was just one of these things that just spurred me into action. And okay, how do we fix this? How do we change this? We also introduced a big change into our business, which could really have a huge impact on just our business in general. So it's all sort of new and exciting. But I didn't take the chance to go and sort of do some random activities throughout the day, which is in the back of my mind to do. But just those things that were happening, it really helped.
Good on you. Good on you. What number would you say you are today?
7.5.
Okay. It's good improvement. It's good.
If I can jump in and just say that there's a couple of things he did that I don't think he even realized, but it put him back in stride. On Saturday, he cleaned our second bedroom, took the bed out and did everything we needed to do in the bedroom, and also, which is something we needed to do, and also went out with his best mate in the afternoon when training, and it was like unexpected last minute. So I don't think you even realized, Joe, but that was, 2 unexpected activities that he did.
And when he does that, I mean, could you see a difference in Joel then, in the way he showed up?
Yeah, definitely, straight away. He called me as soon as he undid the bed in the bedroom and took everything out, and he took everything to the garage, and he called me to show me, and he's like, look at what I've done. I'm like, cool, we didn't plan that we were gonna do that already, but that's cool, yay.
I think it's really nice you two are so go Joel.
I was just going to say, but it was funny because I called her looking for a compliment, and her reaction was almost like, what did you, because we wanted to do it, but it just wasn't part of her plan. It's like, that was supposed to be at 10:57 on the 13th of March, and you've done that today. What's going on? And I was like, and her friend was in the car, and she's like, that's amazing, Joel. Well done. And then it's like, oh yeah, good stuff. Thanks for that. Had to, because it just Amanda's it just, things like that just shake her, and she kind of she just goes, you can see her mind just ticking. She's like, I don't think this was part of the plan, and I wasn't supposed to happen this way in my head. But then I can also see then what Amanda does is she'll go away, process it, and come back and say, Joel, that was really good what you did, and so sort of makes that effort.
That's very cool. How good do you have that understanding with each other? It's very, very cool. All right, anyone else want to quickly share something about their score? Okay, well, let's move on into today. So this is an open forum for you to be able to raise any question or experience around your ID, and therefore learn more about yourself and the ID as a framework, so that you can, not only operate more in stride, but make the biggest impact with your life as you'd like to make. So who's got something on their mind? Maybe we can even, if there's a few different topics, we can just table them and work them through today.
I'd like to raise something, Paul, and could have commented earlier, but I was finding my brains, which I'd left sitting on the laptop when I closed it last night. So I noticed yesterday, being part of a strategic planning discussion around an association I'm involved with, and I noticed the judgment about my improvise and lack of complete. They did not have those words, but I remember when we first did my profile and I went, oh, but that's naughty, because I'd been judged for most of my life for that. And I noticed it again yesterday. you know, two particularly capable and skilled women who kept going on wanting to drill down to details, wanting to work with tactics and operational specifics. And I know I'm very good at strategic planning because I can take that umbrella view and see the horizon, and I can see for miles, and I can see where the roadblocks are on the road that others don't know exist. So, you know, it's like playing the eagle, and I love it. And yet continually it's, yes, but you're not thinking about how we could implement this. Yes, but you're not counting, and it might not get finished. And, you know, have you costed it out physically, emotionally, financially? You know, it's like, oh, I know enough through my ID to not become as wounded and to shut down as I would have once. But it's still very hard to bring that talent to the table when it isn't recognized and valued.
You raise a number of really good points in that one example, Catherine. It's a really good example. That, you know, first of all, I would just say kudos to you for even just knowing that it's, you know, it's an ID difference. So you can sort of position it there and it doesn't wound you as much and it doesn't probably have as much damage on the relationship. But isn't it interesting that for all you do know yourself and you know your ID, you know exactly what's going on, it still does damage you, like it still does hurt. And more the point, it like paralyzes you, because then the consequence is you don't want to show up then. You don't want to keep pouring more in if that's what the result's going to be, even though that's your desire, you know. So it's very interesting. So what is it you would like to know, or maybe work through with the group?
Thank you for asking that. Any insights, understandings, or more importantly, perhaps, because I think I do understand, I certainly respect these women, what modifications to my own behavior without getting out of my stride could be constructive and supportive?
Great question. Great question. So before we go there, I just want to help you, allow you to help people who are the opposite of you, who might be more like the ladies in the meeting yesterday. Explain to, you know, the verifiers on the team and the avoid improvisers and so on, the people with an opposite ID, what happens in someone like you when you feel that sense of judgment? Because I don't think we, as I'm saying, even for myself, we don't even realize, firstly, the effect on someone, but often that what we're saying or doing is a judgment. Like we might think, well, I wasn't judging, I was just questioning, or I was just asking, but you know, it's not how it lands for someone with your idea.
And yeah, what's the effect? What's the impact? It's the little child with her vivid imagination and her excitement around the sense of possibilities and the wonder of what could happen if we ... and you know, it does bring up connotations of world peace and but more for me, it's about like my life mission is to have people discover and display their magnificence. And so it's, even at my mature age, it's, oh, they don't want my magnificence. And the little child inside is going, you don't want to hear about Wonderland? You don't want to know about what could be? You just want to work with the limitations and the restrictions and the impossibilities that you're currently experiencing. That's what you want to keep proving, that you are right. Well, let's say we know you're right, and there are many ways of being right. So yeah, it's like, okay, if you're not, I don't mind that you can't talk my language. That's fine. But I would beg you to be curious about my language, to respect that I speak a different language, and to invite me to speak it, that it just may have something to enlarge, expand. It might create a third way. I'm passionate about what my third book, which is the ampersand factor. Life works with and.
Yeah.
Can we listen to each other and develop and without ever making each other wrong? Because when you make me wrong, I run back into my little child closet.
Totally. It's a shrinkage and a paralyzing effect, isn't it? You know? So does anyone have any suggestions, particularly people who might have a similar ID to Catherine, in terms of the avoid, verify and improvise, that you can say, well, yeah, that used to happen for me, but here's what I've learned to do in terms of the perspective or the approach you have that shields you from that type of shutdown experience.
Catherine, it's Gail here. What I do is when I get that response, because like you, I get it all the time, and I don't want to become go back into myself. So I say, well, you know, I think it might work. Why don't we do a collaborative exercise so you can do your thing? So if they want a plan for the detailed costing, I say, well, look, why don't you do that? And let's see if it works. And they come up with another one. Well, why don't you do that? So I just delegate it all back to them. And they generally go, oh, yeah, all right, I'll do that. I don't generally get resistance. But I mean, I do it very gently and nicely, because we all have to work together and we all have to be part of the solution. And so although my idea might seem off the wall to them, if they want to do the background work, they can. They don't generally go, oh, we're not doing that. They generally are prepared. I don't know if it's just the way I present it, but they're generally prepared to go, okay, I'll do that. And then we can meet again and put the thing into a better context. Does it
ever happen? Does it ever happen where they come back and they say, Gail, we've done all this, we've scoped all this out, and here we've got this solution. You're like, oh, we're not doing that anymore. We're actually going to do this idea. Decided to change.
Generally, no, because the people who do that generally aren't complete improvisers. And so if they're looking at something, they haven't got another idea. Whereas I've got another 35 if they want them.
Yes.
Well, that's what I mean.
I generally find, yes, but it just depends who's on the meeting and who's on the team. If there's another strong improviser, which is very rare, you know, they might come back with another idea. But generally, if that's what we've decided and we've got the opposite IDs, they generally do what's agreed and come back and say yes. And the idea may be useless anyway. I mean, I'm sure, Catherine, you know some of your ideas don't work.
Absolutely. I think there's a couple of contextual issues as well, which is it's a voluntary association. There is no power and authority. Any street cred that I've had for having held leadership roles and been around since its beginning 30 years ago, any street cred is now diminished by the fact that I have grey hairs coming through. And of course, you know, when you're older, in many organizations, you lack mental competence. You know, there's this assumption that, you know, she's off with the fairies. So yeah, it's how to explain to them the improvised drive when they don't know ID. Perhaps that's part of it. I say I'm an ENFP and I think globally. Is there a better way of, which doesn't describe improvise, but it at least gives them a context they're partially familiar with? Is there a better way of succinctly describing what my gifts and talents are that I can bring to the table without them going, oh, she's off with the fairies, and dismissing it completely?
That's a great question. That's a great question, you know, because anyone would say that the benefit of being on the team and having that panel and that meeting is we all bring different talents to the table. You know, it makes it richer for us to have different perspectives. We theoretically say we want it, and then the minute someone shares it, we shut it down, you know. So I think that's a great question. Does how does someone else do it? You know, in terms of packaging up your idea. And I'm thinking particularly, sorry, Jose, I'm just, before we get to you, I'm just thinking of someone who's got an idea, like a strong improvised drive. When you're faced with that situation, do you have a way of presenting yourself so that it lands really credibly for the other people to then want to accept your contribution?
So I know Susan has similarly been challenged with bringing her high improvise to a corporate table. And I'm wondering if Susan has anything that she could share with me. How do you describe who you are and how you like to work?
Hi, I've just been thinking. I think the thing is that acknowledging, first and foremost, acknowledging who you are, being in that process. So I usually just say, look, I'm really good with big picture. I can see, you know, a vision. I'm more of a visionary, and then also acknowledging what their talents are, so that they then feel, you know, pretty chuffed as well. And what can they contribute? And yes, and I'll say, actually, I really don't like the detail. I respect it. I understand that it's important and all the rest of it. And I really love people who can verify. I really do, because that's just not my thing. And then they start to feel, you know, like they're pretty good. And then collaborate together to move forward with the process. So I know it sounds simple, but I find that works.
I think it
Thanks,
used to work
Susan.
for me. I think the grey hairs are working against me. Thank you, Susan.
That can work for you. It's all that wisdom you've got.
Oh, yeah.
Catherine, I've got a few grey hairs too, and
No.
I would, although purple hides it, but I would actually totally agree with Susan. I just say, look, I've got lots of ideas here, and very often someone who's worked with me before will say, yeah, Gail's great with coming up with ideas, and I just say, but I'd really appreciate help from somebody else, because I'm not so good at putting the detail together. You know, I can do you a big macro plan. You just need to come in and help me with the detail. And people normally respond to that because I'm just validating them. And authenticators like it when you ask for help. So I just find that generally it kind of comes together in a sort of a, you know, in funny way. And then I went to another meeting a few weeks ago and somebody said, hey, Gail, you're the one with the ideas. Can you help us here? We're stuck. So they'd actually acknowledged that that's what I do. And so I gave them a few ideas, and then I went to sleep for the rest of the meeting while they were working out, you know, what to put, where to put the pin here and where to do that there. And it wasn't it for me, but at least I gave them the idea and they were able to follow through. So I kind of think if you acknowledge them, they will respect you. And I don't think it's about grey hairs. I really don't. I think people respect what you've got and bring to the table, regardless of the grey hairs. Look at Judy. She's just had her 80th birthday and we all respect her, and obviously her clients do too.
Thank you, Gail, because in this voluntary context, and I've been part of this association for 30 odd years, I guess that is that we all work that way, or we wouldn't have survived. And what I'm hearing and feeling is that when pressure is on, sometimes we are more defensive about our ways of doing it. And certainly I was being internally anyway, extremely defensive about not being heard. So that's been very helpful. Thank you. That's great.
So there's some different perspectives being added here. I can see in the chat some really good approaches, like different approaches.
Yes.
Greg, we'll come to yours in a second. I think you offer a really neat perspective. But Jose, I'm interested, you wanted to say something before, but I'm also interested, you might share with, you know, for people like Catherine and Gail and Susan who have got that style of ID, you know, what approach could they take for someone like you who is looking for the substance? What could they say that would really land for you to make you like stop you in your tracks and say, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's a good perspective. I'll now sort of be less judgmental or more accepting of your approach? What would work for you?
Through the whole thing, I've been on both sides of that fence of having ideas and having them shot down. And usually they're not my ideas. They're somebody else's ideas, someone like you that's come along and said, what if? And I go, anything you can say what if to, I can make happen. My problem is that if we don't process the what's the best what if, as somebody else said earlier, I could end up spending a lot of effort doing something that's actually not the best thing we can do. So the mistake that we make is we think, well, then I have to prove to you that all these ideas aren't going to work, and that way we find the right one. It's not about what's going to work. And that's where I think in the meeting like this, for example, right? We each have to wait our turn. We have to wait and say, this is when it's my turn to put my input in. And sometimes some of us get a little bit carried away because we don't have the gray hairs of wisdom to know I can get it out later. And we go, oh, but, and then, and also, and so that sort of interrupts people's flow, and it disrupts the intent. So usually the best way we do this when there's a meeting is have a clear understanding of what we're trying to achieve. If it's strategic, then all these tactical things aren't going to help. So we all understand the strategic, and then someone like me will then go, time for me to be quiet and listen, and maybe suggest a hint that may give inspiration to another idea, but not to say no, but rather to say, and what if, and then leave it at that. It's not because I need you guys to come up with those ideas. Otherwise I've got nothing to chase. I've got no miracle to create myself. If you don't come up with, hey, this would be a miracle, but we all have to agree on what success looks like at the end. And that's what you're trying to decide. You're trying to say, there's lots of successes we could achieve. Here's a whole bunch of them. And then the next step, later, somebody else can have that conversation about, somebody else can step up and say, of those, I'm very good at analyzing things. I can say that one would probably be the best one. And somebody else who's also really good at bringing people together can get everyone to go, yes, that's the way we're going. And then you give me the job and I'll make it happen. Generally, that's the way it works.
That's awesome when you know your ID, right? And when so the challenge is if you, or like me or Catherine or whoever, doesn't know the other person's ID and they don't know our ID. And so does it then fall on us because we're understanding, trying to get a level of understanding of all of this? Does it fall on us to concede or to say, okay, Catherine or Joel or whoever, just throw the idea in, just be aware that you're going to feel attacked and judged, and just sort of kind of let it flow a little bit? What do you do when you don't know?
So just to keep this moving along, and so we can then maybe move to something else that someone might have on their minds, I'll throw a suggestion at you that might help you, whether you know their ID or not, Joel. And I'm thinking back to a couple of meetings I've been in that I would consider best meetings, the really gold standard. And they started with people going around the room just saying, I'm at my best when. And whether they had an ID or not, it was just really powerful to, in a snapshot, just say, I'm at my best when I'm brainstorming new ideas. That's what I bring to the table, and being able to see the high level and the possibilities. That's me, full stop. And someone else might say, I'm at my best when I'm drilling into the details. So, and I'm thinking of someone right now who said, you won't hear me say a lot for the first part of the meeting, but that doesn't mean I'm not listening or engaged. I'm absorbing. And before the meeting finishes, I'll share my perspectives, but I'm just absorbing. Don't misinterpret that. And at the end of the meeting, I'm thinking of this one meeting, it was at Deloitte, and the people at the end of it said, that's one of the most powerful meetings I've ever been in, because everyone was aware, not of what their job functions were, but of what they brought to the table in terms of their different mindsets and talents. And honestly, whether they had an ID or not, you could still answer that question of, I'm at my best when, And I think if you then know, most people have got a reasonable EQ, want everyone to show up at their best, and might help them be more respectful of your differences then. So just a quick suggestion that I've seen work like really powerfully.
There is though that little bit of, and this is what something we sort of have to carry in the back of our minds, because I'm thinking about all the people that I don't know their IDs, but I know how they operate. I know their it takes a while to establish that knowledge, but you know their buttons and their highlights and what they're looking for. And it's about respecting the fact that sometimes it's not what they want to do from their ID, it's where they've landed because of the onion skins. And so they're actually saying things they don't agree with, but they feel they have to say them because that's the space they've found themselves in. And when I see that, I try and approach it with a lot of compassion and go, awesome. Yeah, but you can be better. You can do better. Come with me here. Let's give this a go. Let's see if we can unravel that and bring out the best. Because, you know, I know you're quiet, but we need to hear you, that kind of thing.
That's really good, Jose. Really good. Hope that helps you, Catherine. There's a lot of good food for thought there and in the chat as well, obviously. Or does someone else have something on their mind that they'd like to share or ask of the group?
Paul, could I just add to that? I think Catherine mentioning the word judgment, I'm curious as to whether other IDs also feel that sense of judgment at some point. So that's one thing. The second thing too is that sometimes when I can interpret people as judging me when they might be just silent, especially verifiers. They'll sort of pull back and think. And I used to take that as, oh my God, I've done something wrong, or, you know, what are they thinking? And so I would interpret that as a judgment. And the other thing was, if people ask me too many questions, I also would feel, you know, as you said before, Paul, interrogated. Right. And then also if I hear their comments or sometimes criticisms, then I would also take that as they're judging me in some way. When in actual fact, that's just them doing their thing. Yeah. And it's taken me a long time to dissociate from that. Yeah.
So what's the difference for you, Catherine? Sorry, Susan. If we were in a conversation and I was asking lots of questions, how can we have that conversation that you don't feel judged by, but it's still, you know, exploring all sorts of things? I'm guessing it's if I'm coming from a place of curiosity rather than criticism, but does even curiosity, because it involves questions, does that feel like judgment, or what's the nuanced difference that would help others understand how to adjust their approach so that it keeps you engaged in a really positive and enthusiastic way and doesn't feel like the judgment that you just referred to?
I think it's the way it's said sometimes, but it's more about me understanding where they're coming from rather than coming into my own, you know, feeling of insecurity or sensitivity around it all, if that makes sense. Yeah. So
if your feeling is that they're coming from a place of curiosity and just passion to understand it, is that okay?
Yes, that's okay, but not everyone will be like that. Okay. Yeah, it's yeah, and I've got to sometimes just pull back and go, yes, that question's valid, and maybe I don't know the answer. Right. And I'll get back to you, that type of thing. So yeah.
But I think if I can just jump in there, I think that's the power of us knowing our own ID. And from my perspective, questions and raising concerns and seeing the risk, it's my way of trying to make your idea work. So what I used to do with Joe is he would say an idea and I would immediately go to the risk of that idea and what's the plan and how can we make that work and start scoping it out. And now I learn, and he does that, he'll say, hey, this is just an idea, I'm just brainstorming, I'm just saying it out loud. And I'll immediately go, okay, so this might not be happening, so let's just hear it, collaborate and talk about it. And I think that for you guys, knowing your ID, you can go, you know, this person I'm talking to, maybe they're just verifiers and avoid improvisers, and they're just trying to get more detail around how they can make that idea work. And from my perspective, if I'm not even interested in the idea, I'm not gonna even ask anything. So that's even worse. When I'm engaged, I'm like, well, and I might not express it like this is a great idea, but I'll go, oh, how we can make this work, and I'll start asking questions about that. And so I guess this is the other side of the, of the situation. So yeah, not sure if it helps.
Thanks, Amanda. Good questions and observations, Susan, too. These are the nuances I think really help people understand how to adjust their approach. I know Ian and I have lots of conversations where Ian's 8363, and that completed, we'll be brainstorming an idea, and he'll often catch himself and go, oh, I'm already like almost instantly into the, but how are we going to do that? And he'll pull himself up and sort of say, oh, we're just back here brainstorming, aren't we? Yeah, it's just interesting, and verify straight into wanting to analyze it as well instead of holding back. And so it is possible to check yourself if you've got those instincts and stay back at the higher level brainstorming conversation, but you just need to keep reminding yourself of that.
It's a conscious effort.
If I can say what I do, because I do a lot of one-on-one, being a tax advisor, I'm always coming at people with ideas. But when I first did it, of course, I couldn't justify anything. So I never now say something if I haven't got a justification behind it. And that helps as well, because otherwise they shoot you down in flames, you're floundering, you're immediately feeling defensive. So my mechanism now is to be able to justify it and say, yeah, well, that's because, and that generally works, but that's not something I do naturally. That's something I've had to train myself to do. And that can sometimes help. Well, it helps me every day, but I mean, it can sometimes help other people.
All right, let's move on to another example. Has someone got something else on their mind?
If I may, in the gap, that was a long enough gap for me. I haven't been here for a while. I've been working, and I'm hearing something that I wasn't hearing when I was coming every week, and it's a thread in there. So I'm not after anybody. I'm just saying this is what I'm hearing, and it's related to the idea that we're trying to get them to understand us. We want them to appreciate what we give. We want them to, the wording we've been using. Why don't they do this? I'm trying to help them. Why don't they hear me? I'm trying to bring them out. Catherine had a great thing. She was saying, she goes, but I'm here to make them become better and be there for them. It's not about me and that sort of thing. And I'm realizing from their point of view, they feel judged by us because they're not listening to us. And so I think people's reaction to us is they don't care what we know because they don't get that we care about them. It's all these conversations have been about what do I have to do for them to get me in a fashion, not all of them, but I'd just like to posit the idea that when you're not getting through and it's not being received, you're not being heard, that they don't feel heard, they don't feel received, and they're not getting through, and shift the focus out on them and find out what's missing for them. When they see you caring for them, they're going to care for you. That's kind of I may have said it badly, but I would like to shift the attention off about what do they need to do to get me to what do I need to do to get them.
So great point, Greg. Can you play it out so that we can sort of grab hold of it? Like if someone is being critical or wanting to delve in the detail and you're feeling judged, and it's, let's say it's something to do with them not being heard, how would you then deal with
the judge one's a good one. I'm feeling judged, I'm feeling dismissed, I'm feeling ignored. There's the bucket of them there that are all related, but they're all the same worm in a fashion, and they're eating away at us. I'm feeling judged, and I want to posit this: when you're in those moments, what if they weren't judging me? What if what I'm interpreting as judgment is they're asking for help somehow, or there's something missing for them, or they're feeling hurt, or they're feeling judged? What if they weren't judging me? What else could be behind that comment? what else are they asking for? And then if you want to play black belt, what if they are judging me? Let's say they are, what's behind that? Like, what have I done, or what's going on here that they feel the need to judge me? And this is personally, when I've said to Vera, but I said, my wife Vera, and she goes, what if that was a question because I didn't understand you, not a criticism of what you just said? What would you do differently? And it says, she goes, like, for example, when you're working with a kid or you're working with someone who doesn't get, you're very gentle with them. You're very inquisitive. You're very curious. With me, you went, what? And I went, oh yeah, I wasn't coming from the back. So I'm just saying, what if they weren't judging you? What if they weren't dismissing you? What if they're asking for help?
And where would you go then, Greg?
Into questions, mate. I would go, well, what's behind, every time someone says something, they use a word and we go, oh, so they said, look, I'm not sure if I can get behind that. We go, behind how? When you see get behind it, what do you mean? You're not sure about what? Whatever they've just said are about 10 questions. Their words exactly. You use their exact words, turn it into questions and discover what's missing for them. That's my overall thing, what's missing for them. It's not about me. It's the old attention out thing again. You're on a quest to understand them. And that's what's for you all you up improvise, that's the challenge. What do they need to hear me?
That's really good, Greg. Thank you. Good input. All right. Well, it's something I'll share maybe while someone thinks of an issue they want to talk about. So I heard an awesome strategy this week for avoid verify people. So we talk about verify as having a great sense of knowing, like a strong gut feel that you either know or you don't know, and resonates viscerally in your gut, right? So I'm thinking of those of you like, Joel, you're a 2 in that drive, so I'm sure you relate to this. So sometimes you just have this gut feeling that I know this is what we need to do, or I know it's not. And then what I found is when there's a situation where you go, well, I don't know, I don't have any sense of this, I don't know, that generally to me and my experience with you guys means then we're not ready yet to make that decision. But sometimes you're being pressured to make a decision. And this person said, you know what I do? I thought this is brilliant. I get a coin, I toss the coin, and then I watch my reaction to the coin. Because given that your ID is one that reacts, if you say, well, if it's heads, we're going to go ahead with it, and then you toss the coin and it comes up heads, and then you have a reaction like, oh no, I don't want to do that. There, it just gives you that next bit of information that helps you react. And I thought it was a really awesome strategy, like really practical. I think we can almost all of us could picture it happening, because you do then have an uncontrollable reaction to the way that coin goes, and you truly don't know which way it's going to land when you toss it. So it's a really instinctive subconscious reaction that might just help tip you left or right, as it were, to know which way to go. And I just thought for those of you who are trying to get comfortable with, like, you have this sense of knowing, but how do you really apply it, even in situations where you don't know? I thought that was a really cool little strategy. I don't know whether you'd find that helpful, but I wanted to share it with you in case you do.
There was a documentary on SBS last night. Well, no, it was Insight, their regular weekly program, and it was on intuition. And the range of presenters or people in the limited audience that they had were from professors of neuroscience through to a jet pilot, through to a mountain climber, and a whole range of people, and how they see intuition and how they feel it and recognize it and use it. Quite a wide range of descriptions and definitions. It was really worthwhile. I'd recommend anyone who was interested in that going to SBS online, whatever it is, and having a look.
Thanks, Catherine. So for people who are overseas and would want to dial in, SBS is one of the television stations here in Australia. So if you just, would Google SBS TV, I'm sure it would come up so you could then find that particular segment.
That's a good point, Paul. Because and then what becomes really difficult when you know, or you're just like, that's what we're doing. When you get, and then you get questioned, like it's sometimes you don't even know the reason why you're making that decision, and that can be what the source of the frustration is, because it's like it just is. And I think I mean, with the improvise as well, it's like, this is a great idea. Why? I don't know, but it just is. Like, can we just do it, please? And so sometimes that can be a difficulty, because well, Meta and I are running the business, and if it's me that's giving the direction, I know I can come off as very dismissive and somewhat impatient, and it's something to really be aware of, because it's good to sort of, it is important to sit down and go, well, there's a reason behind it. There actually is. If you ask the question why, you'll eventually know why you know. But it's a really difficult and frustrating process for someone like me.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, well, when you're you know, the intensity of your idea, your attention span for that sort of, you know, your ability to stay focused on is very brief. So the impatience and the frustration is huge. And you can't hide it. I mean, 17 Authenticate, it's going to be all over your face.
Yeah. It is interesting. I know we're going back, but just on the ideas thing, sometimes I'll talk to my PA and I'm like, all right, I'm thinking this and I'm thinking this, and I just come up with all these ideas, and then I'm like, cool, and then I'll go back to my desk, and then at the end of the day, she's like, all right, Joel, so I've called this company about this. I'm like, no, I was just throwing something out there. No, I didn't want to do any of that. So yeah, what Amanda was saying before, I say, no, I just want to let you know, it's only an idea. I'm just throwing it out there. Don't, you know, I'm just here to discuss, and yeah, that's worked really well.
That's great. That's really good. Yeah, and keep in mind too, when you are talking about an idea and you say this is an idea and I can't justify it, but I really want to get on and do it, the people who are going to follow through and do it are treating that as a plan. And what they maybe don't realize is that because of you being the ideas person, as you begin the journey to execute or implement that idea, you're going to keep chopping and changing to get, and maybe changing direction altogether, you know. And I think it becomes very frustrating to them when they're sitting off to do what they heard you say, or what they heard you request, and they don't know that it would be okay to deviate off of that path with other exceptions that might come up along the way. So, you know, it might mean you need to stay involved in some of that as well. So as they run into certain roadblocks, you go, okay, we'll try this, we'll try that, or, you know, and keep it moving along. Delegating an idea is one of the toughest things to do for both the idea generator and for the people trying to implement, if there's that separation. And I think, you know, staying involved along the way to keep new ideas involved on how they get through to the bigger picture is important as well. All right, anyone else? So I'm going to mention about the power of keywords and how they, this is maybe something for those of you who are really learning about idea, you can start to focus on. And we actually have a matrix on this that I'll make sure we send out with the link. I'll give it to Ian to send out. I was in a meeting a couple of days ago, and the leader of this team was 6735, so a strong authenticator, and with an avoid complete drive, full of impatience, you know. And they said to us, so Paul, when she's moving on and we haven't finished thrashing this thing out, how do we keep her engaged? Because she gets really frustrated, and, you know, it can, like Joel just said, it can seem really dismissive. And they said, is there a word we can use or a phrase we can use that would like hook her back in and we'd be able to keep in the conversation? And I said, well, what occurs to me is, as an authenticator, if you said to her that the picture's not yet clear, I think that would be provocative. And she might as well have got up and stood on the table. And she was like, oh my God, if you tell me that picture is not clear, you are stopping me in my tracks. That meeting is not stopping. We are going to keep going until that picture is clear. And she was like really animated about, and she doesn't get animated, but she was really full on. And her reaction just showed me the power of the way certain words provoke that gremlin within us, you know, the ID gremlin. You got no control over it. Like when you say to a completer that something is a mess, you know, and they're like, okay, that's it, stop everything, we are going to get onto that. Or you tell an improviser that something's impossible or that it can't be done, you know, it's like, oh, stop everything now, game on, you know. And so we have this matrix that's got keywords for the 8 directions of the different drives. And I've just highlighted on that matrix the words that really stand out, that I've seen stand out with different drives. But for all that we try and come up with strategies for what to do in different situations, like getting down to the point where there are just certain words that really push someone's buttons and keep them engaged in a conversation or motivated on a task, I think that's a very good tool to learn. I might see if I can quickly call it up and show you. It might, I think I've got it here. Yeah, here it is here. Let me pull it up.
So while you're loading, Paul, this is like what words for every, oh, here you go. Yeah, everyone, each drive.
So the ones in bold are the ones that I would just say my experience with IDs really like poke the bear, you know, and get people's attention. But it was just really funny to watch this lady's reaction. And then I had a meeting the following day, so I tried it again, you know, with a different ID. And I was just like, it's just fun to see how one word or one phrase can just really rattle the cage and get people really on board, you know. So, you know, I don't know whether anyone here has a reaction to any of these words or can sort of say, you know, validate, yes, this would be true for me. But I thought as a resource, and for those of you in the masterclass wanting to learn about the nuances of ID, like getting down to certain words are like we talk about the language of ID, but these words relate to a precise direction and give you the clue as to how to, you know, keep the person engaged or motivated, or keep yourself engaged and motivated. Like you talked before, I didn't put miracle in for improvise that, but you know, the whole idea of imagine, you know, like, oh my God, imagine this, you know, it just immediately captures the improvised drive. So anyway, just as a tool, I wanted to share it with you. Does anyone have anything I want to react with?
Laura here. I'm very, very much as low as you can go, improvise, avoid improvise. And I was reading through the list, and when I saw own pace, oh, that's like heaven. You know, if I can work at my own pace, that's all you have to say. That's the assurance I need that I'm gonna have the time. And that's just a beautiful thing. Thanks for this list.
Okay, that's really good to know. Thanks, Laura. It's good to know that that's the effect on you at like that subconscious energy level, that phrase. Because if we were then working with you and wanting to really get you engaged and said, you know, you'll be able to work at your own pace, which may still be nanoseconds. It doesn't mean it's slower. It just means without the pressure that someone else would impose on you, right?
Right, exactly. It's just, it just gives me room to breathe.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
You know, Paul, the opposite of those words are just as powerful, meaning when I don't have a clear picture and I don't feel useful or don't feel helpful, man, I go to the dark side so fast. My laser's out and ready to cut off arms, you know?
I was thinking that, Greg, that, you know, like fog, for example, something's a fog. I wasn't quite sure how to represent it, but I thought of the same thing, that there are words in here that you could use the opposite and it would have that effect. Yeah, spot on.
No, but when they're missing, I think that's when we're feeling dismissed. When those are missing, we all wonder where our feelings of dismissal come from. Yes, Catherine was saying there's a childhood thing in the chats, but I think that's our sort of like our recipe, that I'm going to feel that even if you didn't even mean it, even if you didn't even try to dismiss me, I feel not useful. And that's why the attention's got to get off us, because we're the one defining all this stuff. And all I really need to do is find out what's missing for me. Get me helpful, make me useful. You got a happy boy, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Can I add in something there. When I've got something really urgent, I hand it to my PA and say, hey, look, could you send an email off? This is really urgent. When I get the email back and I see what she said, she never uses the word urgent. She always says important. She's high complete and authenticate. The word urgent is never used, even though that was in my original comment. And for me, that will get action. But she can't use it. It has to be important. I just find that fascinating.
Well, if she's an avoid improvise, there's probably an allergic reaction to the notion that it's urgent. Like Greg was just saying, you know, you probably, if you've got the opposite direction, you probably have a really almost negative reaction to the words in the opposite direction to you. Like if I think, for example, if I think of solitude or doing something at own pace and not the pressure, I mean, I almost wouldn't function. You know, there just has to be noise and interaction and activity and some level of pressure.
It's a really good distinction, Gail. Important and urgent. For me, urgent almost paralyzes me because it's just too much. It's like overwhelming. Whereas important, I can easily prioritize something that's important, put on a plan, and just do it at my own pace. Whereas urgent, like, okay, what? Like, it's too much.
Yeah, so cool.
Thanks for that, Amanda.
And I thought it was interesting, the difference between making something real for an authenticator and tapping into really for an avoid authenticator. Like someone like myself who's a 1, if you really want to engage me and you ask me, what do I really feel? Or why did I really do that? And you ask it with that, you know, sense of wanting the deeper answer, like what was really going on. That, like, now you've got me. That's like when we said before about the lack of a clear picture just stops someone in their tracks. If I felt someone was wanting to really understand anything, I'm stopped and I have to engage. So these are real nuances, but they're incredibly powerful at being able to achieve, you know, what we all want, which is how do we push either our buttons or someone else's buttons to get them to engage and stay engaged. All right, so I'll send that in the to Ian, and you can put that with the link, Ian, so that people can get the benefit.
It'll go out with the email.
Powerful little tool, and you know, just start playing with it. I think you'll have fun with the words of either what people really react to and don't. We've actually had that tool for a long time, many years, but it's, you know, it sort of gets hidden down amongst, you know, in the library of things. And when I heard this reaction, I thought we probably don't emphasize the power of certain words enough in how people can utilize ID. All right.
You can also, we can also use those words when we accidentally spill them into conversation by observing how the various people react to them and go, oh, okay, I'll watch out for that next time. I understand that this is how you operate now because that really triggered you. Okay, good.
Well, you even heard Amanda say it before when she said, you know, like, it's overwhelming for me, but if someone says it's important, I can prioritize, I can plan, I can do it at my own pace. And she wasn't saying that because that matches her ID. She was saying that because that's what's natural and what works for her. I mean, at the end of the day, the language you're seeing on those slides and even in the ID reports, that's because they're the words that people used. It's not us making something up to fit in. They're the words that we used. I had a guy who got his ID back this week. His ID was 5447. He's a senior leader at one of our clients. And we went to start talking. He said, Paul, before we start, can I just tell you something? He said, the ID, it's remarkable. It's just remarkable. And he said, it's not so much what it said, it's the way it's been written. And I'm like, well, it's actually written the way you talk, man, because that's where I got it from. I just listened to what you guys say and played it back to you and then made me look really smart. But it was just really copying what people have said. So those words, when people said to me, like with the questionnaire, they'd say, well, if I was answering that questionnaire again, I wouldn't use those options. I'm like, what options would you use? Write down what you would do. and they'd write down words that were almost identical to what were in the questionnaire. And then they go, oh, right, now I get it. I'm like, all I did was use what you use, you know? So those words, when you use them, like they will give you clues on people's IDs, not once, but when you hear a pattern over time, you won't be able to guess their whole ID. You won't guess whether they're a 7 or a 6 or an 8, but you might get some clues directionally by watching how those words land for them. And that is the power of, you know, I guess our masterclass of trying to understand things at that deeper level. All right, guys, we're out of time. Thanks again for another great session. Always love having you on the calls. Have a great week. Look forward to seeing you next week, where we're going to really unpack the improvised drive. Take care, everyone.